And welcome back to the North Star Takes podcast with Bailey Policki and Jacob Alberta. You can find all our videos here on our YouTube channel. Feel free to hit that subscribe button as well as give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram. And today we will be going over our first 53-man roster projection, 1.0 for the North Star Takes podcast. So this will be kind of fun. We'll probably do this a couple times throughout the preseason here, especially after some cuts get going. It'll be interesting to see how things shake out. But without further ado, let's get started here. We'll start with the quarterbacks. There's probably little controversy about what's going to be happening there. I think this will be the first year in a while that the Vikings keep 3 quarterbacks on the active roster.
Yeah.
So you'll have Cousins, obviously, as your starter, Jake Browning as your backup, and Kellen Mond as your third string, at least to start with. I guess, do you have any disputes about that?
No, I feel like that's a slam dunk because, like you mentioned, this will be the first time we've done that since we carried Bradford, Teddy, and Case in that magical 2017 season.
Never forget it.
Yeah, other than that, since then, Zimmer's basically rolled with, Kirk, and then just a veteran backup first was Trevor Siemian, and these last couple of years, it's been our guy, Sean Mannion. So this will be, I like this quarterback room a lot, but I feel like there's not much controversy here. Most controversy probably lies within either keeping Etling or Stanley for the practice squad. But
right, and from what I've seen, Nate Stanley is just not good, and this Danny Etling guy apparently is pretty decent. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do there. It's not going to make a huge difference overall in the long run, though. We'll move on to running backs here. Once again, not a whole lot of controversy. We got Dalvin Cook, obviously, is the starter. Madison's his backup. And then we have Kenny Nwangu being the third string, which I think some people would probably argue maybe they keep Amir Abdullah and keep him as the third string. I think some people think they'll keep 4 running backs plus Ham, the fullback. Ham's a lock to make the roster for sure.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts there? Do you think there's a good chance they keep Abdullah, or do you see him going towards the practice squad or maybe getting cut?
I think there's a pretty good chance they keep him just because he's been a mainstay now on the roster for a little while now. But I don't know. I can't see them quite moving on, just having only 3 running backs. It's not usually what we do, but I mean, I guess we don't usually carry 3 quarterbacks either, so something else has got to give. So maybe Abdullah doesn't make the roster, but that's probably where the biggest controversy lies, whether he makes a team or not. Basically, it probably comes down to if they think he can be a factor in the return game and honestly beat out guys like Westbrook and Nwangu for like kick return duties or something like that. So
yeah, true.
I think they'll keep him, but I would say I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's gone.
Yeah, what's interesting about this projection is we have 25 on offense and 25 on defense. I think usually the Vikings like to have 24 and 26. They like to have that extra defensive player, of course, Mike Zimmer.
Oh, yeah.
Always get in his way.
Yep.
But we'll move on to wide receivers here. And this group is definitely interesting to see how it's kind of transpired over the last couple weeks with training camp getting going and who's had good off seasons, who hasn't. Wide receivers, we got number 1 and 2, Jefferson and Thielen. I don't think there's any controversy there. Number 3, just based on everything we've seen so far, KJ Osborne, wide receiver 3, as it stands right now. This is where it gets a little interesting, though. We got Amir Smith-Marsette at 4, and we have D.D. Westbrook at 5. And I think that's just simply because D.D. Westbrook hasn't really done anything yet in terms of practice or taking any live reps or anything like that. So until he works his way back, I just don't see how he's going to be able to work his way into the top 4 wide receiver rotation. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, you're probably right. Until he actually plays any snaps, I think he'll make the team, but that'll be about it because I don't think he'll really get any looks until he really gets practicing because I think you wouldn't just want to throw a guy out there cold, basically, where he didn't practice much as a receiver. So I'd kind of like to see that happen first, too. But I think once he starts playing a little bit, he'll probably emerge and turn into the third receiver. But, I mean, if Osborne looks really good, then that's great. He can be the third receiver. But I can't imagine Smith-Marsette and Beebe getting too many looks if Westbrook's actually playing. But if he isn't, then there's really an open competition there to get kind of the last snaps of the wide receiver room, really.
Yeah, and so you just mentioned Chad Beebe. We have him just sneaking in at wide receiver 6. It just seems like every year the Vikings find a way to keep Chad Beebe around, so wouldn't be a surprise at all to see him stick around. So that leaves Dan Chisena and Whop Philyor, who there's quite a few fans that like both these guys. I think they're both going to end up getting practice squatted probably. I don't think the Vikings are going to want to lose them, but they're not good enough to make the active roster unless the Vikings decide to do what they did last year and keep 7 wide receivers and then just have Chisena play special teams. So
yeah, I can't see us keeping 7 receivers again. That seems pretty steep, but just depends how much you think a guy like Chisena can really contribute on special teams or not. Like if he improved after last year, because last year, I mean, he didn't look great on special teams. That was the whole point. That's the whole point. He was on this roster. So if he can't like he hasn't improved, I don't see why he should make the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So we're going to move on to the tight end position. Once again, not a whole lot going on here. We got Irv Smith and Tyler Conklin locking down the top 2 spots.
Yep.
Some may believe that there's some sort of competition there with Brandon Dillon and Zach Davidson, and some people think Davidson could actually make the team, which it wouldn't surprise me because he seems very athletic. He's also a tight end / punter / long snapper, so
yes.
He's kind of a jack of all trades player, which I don't know if he's really good at any of the 3, but in this scenario, I guess we have him keeping Brandon Dillon. He's been around for a couple of years. He's
perennial practice squad player who's familiar with what we do. So I see him as the 3rd tight end. But like you said, just because Davidson's an athlete, they might not want to try and put him through waivers to get on the practice squad. So they might just keep him for that reason. Because I know they do keep 4 tight ends sometimes. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them put him on the 53-man roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's Shane Zylstra, who he was a long shot probably to begin with. So I'm sure they'll practice squad him as well. Moving on to the offensive line, which is probably the most crazy group of positions we have here. I mean, It's all out of flux right now. You got Rashad Hill probably starting as your left tackle. Ezra Cleveland is going to be your left guard. You got Bradbury starting at center, obviously. All signs are pointing to Oli Udoh being the starting right guard. And then you got Brian O'Neill as your starting right tackle, who's one of the best right tackles in the league. Then, obviously, you're going to have Christian Darrisaw, your first-round pick, make the team. There's no way he's not making the team. So Mason Cole, who they traded for a 6th-round pick, I believe, this offseason, he's the backup center. Wyatt Davis is as a backup guard. And then it was kind of between Blake Brandel and Dakota Dozier, which I know a lot of Vikings fans are just sick of the Dakota Dozier talk, and we are too.
Gosh,
but there's some sort of affinity there for Dakota Dozier. I don't understand. But
I'll never get that one.
No, and then so in this scenario, we have him keeping Blake Brandel.
Keep an extra tackle. Makes sense.
Yeah, tackles are very important, especially if you lose one or both. So if you can keep both of them around, it just makes a lot of sense. Then we have him practice squatting Kyle Hinton, who some people thought would maybe be able to make the team as a guard. But I don't know. I haven't heard anything about him for training camp so far. So
I heard all about him in the offseason, how he got a lot bigger and he just looked like a really good athlete. But the thing is, ever since training camp started, I haven't heard a peep. So I'm guessing he's probably not likely to make the team. But I could also see him Mir sliding onto that practice squad, which is just fine by me. Project offensive lineman. That's what we've been doing these last couple of years. So.
I mean, it's better than not having any sort of a plan at all for a player, I guess. But
absolutely.
The key here is we are cutting Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia. So
see ya.
If we're running the team, we're putting Vikings fans out of their misery.
Yep.
So moving on to the defensive line, we got our probably the right defensive end starter will be interesting. But we got Daniil Hunter.
Locked in.
Yeah, locked in for sure. Pearson Tomlinson, locked in. Then it's kind of between Wanham and Weatherly, who's going to start at that other defensive end spot. In this scenario, we have DJ Wanham beating out Stephen Weatherly. It could really go either way. I think they're going to split snaps.
Yeah, at least to start the season.
Yeah. And then you got Sheldon Richardson, who's obviously going to make the team. Just a huge addition for us in the offseason. And then you got Patrick Jones, rookie defensive end. Armon Watts, who's been on the team for a couple of years now. Just a solid backup defensive tackle.
And I would argue he was our best interior defensive tackle last year.
Yeah.
Out of everybody that was playing for us.
And people are raving about him in this year's training camp and saying we really have like a 4-deep defensive tackle group, which is just
huge.
Amazing considering how horrible they were last year.
Oh, I know. It was awful.
So sometimes the Vikings keep 10 defensive linemen. In this scenario, we have them keeping 9, and the 9th would be rookie Janarius Robinson, the 4th-round pick. I guess, do you have any thoughts on this? Do you see any controversy here? Maybe one guy making the team over the other?
Yeah, I kind of like the way you got it laid out here. I think this seems pretty accurate because, I don't know, maybe James Lynch. I think he could slide in there instead of Robinson. They're both 4th-round picks, so I mean it's kind of a wash as far as that goes. And then obviously, you don't really like to cut or put him through waivers, but that just might be the reality of the situation. But if you had to guess, they'd probably keep the athlete with Robinson just because there's probably a lot more upside to him than all these other guys that were sliding onto the practice squad in this exercise. So I could see Robinson definitely getting that last roster spot. And honestly, this D line room is deep now, which is just amazing. It's like a huge 180 from what we were playing with at the end of last season. So it probably comes down to the ninth spot because those top 8, I feel like that's just a cinch at this point.
It's got to be.
That's locked in. That's pretty incredible. You go 8 deep where there's just no doubt about it.
I know. It's just like we said, it's a complete 180 from last year, and the defensive line was just horrible.
Exactly.
Moving on to the linebackers, this is probably the most rock solid, at least for starters, group on the team. Barr, Kendricks, Nick Vigil, I think are for sure the top 3 guys there.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of rounding it out, you got Chaz Surratt, who was a 3rd-round pick. He's going to make the team, even if he hasn't really done much for training camp. Troy Dye, 4th-round pick. I think he'll end up making the team again.
Exactly.
These guys just got to learn how to play special teams, and I think they'll be just fine. So that's kind of what they're looking for out of these backup linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Cam Smith, who had open heart surgery last year, is kind of a great comeback story for the Vikings here. Apparently he's looked awesome in training camp.
That's an amazing comeback story.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess maybe Blake Lynch would kind of challenge Cam Smith for that last spot. What are you thinking there?
Maybe, but I feel like they're going to give the nod to Smith just because of how I've heard he's looked in camp. I feel like you got to go with him. He was a tackling machine back at SC, and I know he's had a rocky start at the beginning of his NFL career. I mean, the guy had open heart surgery, so that's to come back just to be in this spot. Even like that's incredible. Hats off to him, but I think he's going to take that last roster spot in the linebacker room.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So we'll move on to corners now. This is once again just kind of a rock solid top 6.
Mm-hmm.
Really no debate about it. Patrick Peterson, Cameron Dantzler, Mackenzie Alexander, Bashad Breeland, Harrison Hand, and Chris Boyd.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody behind them taking a spot from them.
No, those are all Zim's guys. I feel like I can't see him parting with any of them. So I feel like this is pretty cut and dry. Honestly, of most of the position groups on this team, is one of the most clearest cut in my opinion.
Especially with Jeff Gladney out of the picture now, I think it's for sure they're keeping 6 corners.
Yeah, back when we did have Gladney, we had 7. Like that was a lot more controversial because then you'd probably be coming down to picking between like Harrison Hand and Chris Boyd. But now you can keep both of them, and that's Zim's position group really. So I think these have been the 6 guys he rolls with, and I could see those Maven and Henderson both being on the practice squad. So
yeah, for sure. And then finally with the last defensive group here, the safeties, Harrison Smith and Xavier Woods are going to be your starting safeties. There's literally no doubt about that.
Yep.
The backups are a little interesting. There's been a lot of steam about Miles Doran lately. Rather than like Josh Metellus, who was their 6th-round pick a year ago. So that's kind of interesting. And then Cam Bynum, which he was a 4th-round pick this year, 4th or 5th-round pick. So I think he's going to make the team. I think he's kind of got that prototype they're looking for at the safety position.
Yeah.
So we have Metellus on the practice squad for this one. I think it's kind of a toss-up between him and Doran, though. What do you think?
No, totally agree. I think it might literally come down to how they perform in the preseason games, see who seems to have a better head on their shoulders as far as making plays and being in the right spots for Zim and this defense. So I think this is anybody's game here. So I could see either making the roster right now. I'd probably lean towards Doran just because of the training camp steam. But I mean, that could easily change in these preseason games if somebody makes a play that's kind of eye popping. It's like hard to resist as far as putting them on the roster. So
yeah,
I could see it being either of them, but probably lean towards Doran, like I said.
Yeah, for sure. Special teams, pretty easy. You got Greg Joseph as a kicker, Colquitt as the punter, and then DePaul as the long snapper. I think those 3 are pretty set unless Riley Patterson just lights the world on fire here in the preseason.
Yeah, and I could also see us putting Patterson on the practice squad as well.
Yeah, good point there. And then finally, the injured reserve, BC Johnson, who tore his ACL. Jalen Twyman appears he's going to be out for the entire season. And then Blake Prohl just recently tore up his knee in practice. So that's kind of a bummer because he was actually pushing to make a roster spot. He probably could have been the one guy to challenge Chad Beebe. So I guess any final thoughts on this initial 53-man projection?
Honestly, it looks great. This roster feels like it's pretty deep, top to bottom, at every position group. So, I mean, on paper, this team feels like, dare I say, a 12-game winner.
Super Bowl, homeboy.
Yeah, Super Bowl, but possibly more. But obviously, injuries happen, and you really test the depth of your roster and really see how good these guys really are.
Yes.
And that's when, I mean, you're not going to know until you literally get put in that situation. But you like to project, and this looks like a good roster.
Yeah, I agree. I can't find the first loss. So
no, I don't see it all on the schedule.
But that'll do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Feel free to leave a comment below what you think of our first 53-man roster projection.
Yes.
Tell us what we got wrong, what we got right. Be sure to hit that like button as well and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter, and stay tuned for more next time.